So happy birthday, Mr. President, as Marilyn Monroe famously said to a real US President, Jack Kennedy, in the prime of his life, unlike Joe Biden, who's celebrating, if he even knows it is his birthday, his 80th this very day. Now, he's probably going to be facing up to the mere stripling that is Donald J. Trump, who's back on Twitter. Let me start with the Twitter issue because I've just been upbraided by a follower of mine for welcoming Donald Trump back to Twitter, although he hasn't showed up yet. All his old tweets have resuffered, and boy, have we missed the entertainment value. But ask not for whom the bell tolls, said John Donne. It tolls for thee and for every man. And no man is an island, said the same John Donne, entire to himself. Of course, the taking away of the free speech rights of Donald Trump is the taking away of everyone's free speech rights. Our right to hear him, and it moves the dial that much closer to the day when they cancel you. There's a lot of self-cancellation going on at the moment. Man buns are being torn out, tears shed into man bags, skinny jeans being rendered because of the mass redundancies of engineers in the Twitter industry. I'm not sure many of them have ever been inside a boiler suit or had to wash their hands in Swarfiga, but they call themselves engineers. Thousands of them have gone, either been sacked or walked. Apparently, Musk is operating the Twitter platform with 50 people rather than 8,000 people that were there before. Well, that'll go down as the greatest monologue never heard by anybody. I was just on a roll about the software engineers tearing out their man buns, crying into their man bags, rending their skinny jeans, throwing their sneakers out of the window in rage at the new Musk era. Now, Musk's done nothing for me, absolutely nothing. And I still demand that he removes the unjust and untrue Kremlin label that Twitter still publishes on every one of my tweets, even when it's about my boys and their football matches and the trophies that they are winning. It's completely grotesque, but I'm fully behind Musk's decision, taken actually after a poll of, I think, 15 million people. At one stage, 1 million people per hour were voting on a poll of whether or not to bring back Donald Trump. And as I was saying earlier, I hope you heard it, ask not for whom the bell tolls. When they take away the right to speak of Donald Trump, they're taking away your right to hear Donald Trump. And they're taking away your right to criticize and attack what Donald Trump is saying. But if you can't hear what he's saying, then you are not in a position to evaluate it. Who knows, like a stopped clock, he might twice a day at least be right. But you'll never know because they've choked off his free speech pipeline. But the more important point of view for you is if you cheer on the restrictions on other people's free speech rights, the day will come when they come for you. This much is so blindingly obvious. It is astounding that millions of people can't see it and voted, indeed, in that poll to exclude Trump from Twitter. Now, he hasn't come back, but I'm sure that he will, especially now that the 80-year-old springling Joe Biden has begun the appointment through Garland, his Attorney General, of a special counsel to investigate alleged crimes by Donald Trump. They must think that we all are blind. They are seeking to criminalize Trump out of the presidential race because they're terrified that they will lose to him again. Because I've just been looking at a clip from Trumpland by the peerless Michael Moore, whose filmmaking skills I defer to and whose voice in voiceover is second to none. I've just been watching what he said prior to the 2016 election about Donald Trump. I can't play it to you because Hans Zimmer's music is on it and we'd get a copyright strike, but I urge you to look out for it. It's on Twitter now and on other medium, and it is positively brilliant. It is genius. There are the pictures of it. In it, Moore describes Trump as a human Molotov cocktail, as a human hand grenade that can be legally tossed into the midst of the elite. And he still is. And when you look at the people that hate Donald Trump, they are the very people that are hated by hundreds of millions of people around the so-called Western world. The elites hate Donald Trump. The media hates Donald Trump. The professional political class hates Donald Trump. Wall Street and the city hate Donald Trump. The man buns with their man bags hate Donald Trump. But most people hate all of the above. And that's the problem for them about a real live Trump back on Twitter, back in the presidential race. Michael Moore, in that Trumpland clip that you've just seen but couldn't hear, he describes the day prior to the election in 2016 when Trump confronted the Ford Motor Company's executives in Detroit, Michigan, and said to them publicly on camera, "I hear you're planning to make your next models in Mexico and to close these factories here in Michigan. So I want you to know that if you do, I will place a 35% tariff on your cars and nobody will buy them." Now, as Moore says, it doesn't actually matter all that much whether Trump meant it or not. It doesn't matter nearly as much that he didn't, at least not fully, fulfill his pledges to the Rust Belt states, the Brexit states, if you like, in the United States. It's the fact that he had the balls to say what no other presidential candidate, Democrat or Republican, would ever have said to the elites. Whether they meant it or not, they would never even have said it. And Trump still remains that potent threat to these vested interests. If he does run, and if he does make it against young Joe Biden, then obviously the pressure has to be on him to deliver what he promises. But if he runs with those promises, and he includes in his platform an end to the endless wars of the United States, I think he'll do quite well. And more importantly, so do the elites think he'll do quite well. And that's why they've appointed a special counsel to try and put him out the game. We'll be talking to the great Nico House later, one of my all-time favorite guests, about Trump, Biden, and the upcoming race for the Republican nomination, and the retirement of crazy Nancy Pelosi, who at the age of 82 has decided to step down from the minority leadership in the Congress. People say that she broke the glass ceiling and that standing down is a pity. I think standing down is better than falling down, which she's been doing quite a lot recently because she has swilled her way through decades at the top of American political life. She's done nothing for the working people in the United States except make them poorer and expose them to more and more danger in needless wars around the world. Mind you, her family have done very well. They are now billionaires, the Pelosi's, billionaires. Her husband has shown an uncannily canny appreciation of what's likely to happen on the stock market. I'm sure that they've got other things to talk about on the pillow, and that she's not sharing US government secrets and analysis with her stockbroker husband. I'm sure they're talking about even more interesting things like their separate lifestyles. But the fact is, her husband has become a billionaire during the period in which she has been at the top of American politics. Where was I? I was talking about the changes that are on their way in America. And I believe that they are profound and that they need to be. Because, frankly, an American intelligence official, as yet unnamed, though he will have to be named, there will have to be a congressional inquiry into it, one of many, almost dragged the world into World War III last week. An intelligence officer told CNN that a Russian missile had been fired at Poland and that Article 5 of the NATO treaty would now have to be triggered, and that a state of war between the multiple nuclear-armed powers in NATO and the hypersonically nuclear-armed power of Russia would now exist. A state of war that would bring about the end of Europe and perhaps, when it went intercontinental, the end of the whole world. CNN unleashed the dogs of war and cried havoc. And those dogs ran within 60 minutes across every single part of the mass media in every Western country, but in particular, the heart of darkness of the so-called Western world, which is the Anglo sphere, your sphere and my sphere, to whom I'm talking today. The Anglo sphere was driven crazy within 60 minutes of an entirely fake, bogus report being carried on CNN and sourced, poorly sourced, said Jim Clancy, the former CNN legend, just this very day. And the world can't afford to be at the mercy of these ravenous dogs any longer. So if Trump runs as the anti-war candidate, he's got my support, and I think he'll have the support of many across the world, and of course, most importantly, across the United States. I've lost a lot of time because of that interruption, which I'm claiming is some kind of sabotage, but we'll see. We'll have a post-mortem later. Only time for me to say this. Qatar ain't my country, ain't my favorite country, and I ain't their favorite guy. But they are being treated to a festival of Orientalism right at this moment. They're being mocked, they're being insulted, they're being slandered, when all they've done is spend hundreds of billions of their pounds on investments in Western countries and on the ownership of some of the most important football clubs in the world, and of course on the World Cup itself. Not on their own team, whose pathetic nature was shown ingloriously in the opening game today when little Ecuador gave them 2, going on 10. But they are putting their money in the service of the football world, people like me who love, I mean truly love, to see the World Cup. Now, I don't know if you know, but Qatar was a British colony until 1971. And the Beatles were only just dead when Britain gave up its colonial power in Qatar and it became an independent country. Don't you think the BBC, the beating heart of the British Empire, ought to show a little more humility before lecturing us, before the game kicked off about Qatar's human rights record. I don't know what their human rights record is in detail. I just know it's better than ours. I just know it's better than America's. I just know it's better than Saudi Arabia's and Bahrain's and the United Arab Emirates and 100 other countries I could name that nobody in the Western media ever criticizes at all. I'm sorry my monologue was so rudely interrupted, but we've got some great guests coming up. Stay tuned. I'll be back in just a minute.